Okay, good morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube. Iyun. Today we're analyzing one of the longer Mishnayos I've ever seen. Certainly the longest in Maseches Challah. Perek Dalid, Mishnah Ches. The Mishnah distinguishes between three types of land. There's land which is Vadai Eretz Yisrael, where not only Yoshua apportioned the land, but also when they came back in the time of Ezra, they also conquered the land, reconquered the land. And then there's a second type of land which was only a portion in the time of Yeshua, but the Oli Bavel were not Kobesh. So there's a machlokas about that. Kitcher Rishona, Kitcher L'Shaisa, Kitcher L'Aslavo. Right? The first Chalukah that Yeshua gave out, it was at Makadish, even if they didn't subsequently reconquer the land. Or only until the recapturing of the land. They didn't recapture it, so it loses its Kedusha or not. That's a machlokas that's widely known in the Gemara, famous in the Gemara. We'll touch about that in a second. And then there's land which is clearly not part of Eretz Yisrael. Yeshua never even gave the land out in the first place, so there's no Kiddush. Now, there's a discussion whether Challah applies outside of Eretz Yisrael. Every American woman takes off Challah when they make a dough. Is it so pasha, right? There's a Tosos in Maseches Kedushin on Daf Lamed Vav 36, I think. That says Challah applies midrabanan in America, outside that places that are definitely outside of Eretz Yisrael. However, I don't know if I believe that after this Mishnah, because the Mishnah talks about these second and third places. It's a place where there was Kedusha Rishona but no Kedusha Shniya, so you have to take off two Challahs, right? Achas la'or v'achas la'kohen. Shal or yesh la'shir, v'shal kohen ein la'shir. The real challah, the 124th, which has a shear, that's the shear you're supposed to be a challah, 148th for a baker, the one you're going to burn, because it's considered part of Eretz Amim, so you have to burn it, that has a shear. Shal kohen ein la'shir. The second one, where you shouldn't forget about challah, right, because the first one's burned, so people are going to think, oh, challah is always burnt. So the one you give to a kohen, ein la'shir. He has to burn it also. Min anar v'adamonav lifnim shtei chalos. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, the third part, you also take off two chalas. Achas or achas kohen. Similarly, one is burnt and one's given to a kohen. Shal or in lashir, shal kohen yesh lashir. The one that's burnt is no shear, and the second one is you shouldn't forget about challah. Yesh lashir. It has the proper shear of 124th or 148th. Now, why in the second and third places you flip it? In the place which is kedusha rishona v'lo kedusha shniya, so then the one that you burn has a shear, and the one that's completely outside of Eretz Yisrael, never had Kedusha Yisrael, so then you give the shear, the one you burn, right, has no shear, the one you give to a Kohen has a shear. I like to say it like this. In Mishnah Zayin, we talked about Trumas and Maestros, and Syria. Syria is considered a place that had Kedusha Rishona, but not Kedusha Shniya. So it's Malchok, so Ezra and Gamliel are Chayim and Trumas and Maestros or not. Mitzvahs are tluyas ba'aretz, mitzvahs that are dependent on the land, like Shumas and Maestros, which is dependent on crops growing from the land. That's the shas. Onus on Maestros, the chiyuv of Shumas and Maestros begin when the plant matures, when it's still attached to the ground. That's mitzvah mamash of tluyas ba'aretz. That only applies, Upasuk Gamliel, only applies in Eretz Yisrael. Only applies in Eretz Yisrael. Gamliel says, right, even though there was Kedusha Rishona in Syria, but there's no Kedusha Shniya. We pass in Kedusha Rishona technically, Kitcha L'Shaisa, but lo Kitcha L'Asad level, like on Leo, there's no Kedusha anymore, and therefore there's no Chiyuv Shumas and Maestros. Challah is not exactly, it is a mitzvah Tuliyar. It says, Bevoachem ala Aretz, it's when you come to the land Challah. Challah is Chayav once they came to Eretz Yisrael, once they were Kovesh Eretz Yisrael and divided Eretz Yisrael, then Challah became a Chayav. But is it a mitzvah Tuliyar? It's not a mitzvah Tuliyar. Is it only in Eretz Yisrael or not Eretz Yisrael? So this is where I would like to make a distinction in Shumas and Maestros and Challah. And Challah, even though we pass in telling on Leo, like usually shown a Kidja L'Shayis or Lo Kidja L'Asad level, that's only when things directly going from the ground. But things that are, there's two types of mitzvah tuliyas ba'aretz. Mitzvah tuliyas ba'aretz that are literally dependent on the ground of Eretz Yisrael, the literal fertile soil of Eretz Yisrael, and there's a mitzvahs that are dependent on living in Eretz Yisrael. V'la'achem are living in Eretz Yisrael. So when we say Kedusha Rishona, Kitcha L'Shaisa, Lo Kitcha L'Asad Lava, and we pass like that, that's talking about halachas that apply directly to the ground of Eretz Yisrael, because they didn't reconquer it, so therefore it loses Kedusha. However, when it comes to mitzvahs that are based on living in Eretz Yisrael, like challah, when you need dough, the chiyuv of challah happens when you need the dough. It's not attached to the ground anymore. That's dependent on living in Eretz Yisrael. So for those halachas, we say Kedusha Rishona, Kichala Shaisa, the Kichala Asad Lavo, because it's not dependent on the ground anymore, right? If we conquered, in time of Yeshua, they conquered the land, they gave out the land, they lost it, and Nebuchadnezzar, and they never regained it, so it's lost. However, the mitzvah of Kluyas Ba'aretz, of being in Eretz Yisrael, once you reconquered the main part of Eretz Yisrael, so therefore, it goes back to the time of Yehoshua. We own Eretz Yisrael, so are you considered living in Eretz Yisrael? If you're in a city that wasn't reconquered, it doesn't make a difference. We always go based on the original conquest of Eretz Yisrael. That's called living in Eretz Yisrael, even in a place that wasn't reconquered, but you're living in Eretz Yisrael because that's the Balachim al-Aretz says in the pasuk, when you come to the land, that's how you determine Kedusha Eretz Yisrael. Like Challah, how do you determine mitzvahs that are Kluyas Ba'aretz that are not dependent on the actual ground itself? When you come into the land, Balachim al-Aretz, you come to the land, was it part of Eretz Yisrael or not? So therefore, with Kedusha Rishona, Kichala Shaisa, the Kichala Asad Levos. That's the difference in these two sections of this Mishnah over here. If it's in a place where it was originally part of Eretz Yisrael, now it's not part of Eretz Yisrael, so then you have to take off two challahs. The first one is the real one, right? The first one is real. That's to have the shear, because really mitzvah of chal is chal midoraisa. However, midorabanan there goes there that it's really now belongs to non-Jews. So therefore, the tumas eretz amim midorabanan applies over here because it looks like goyish land. So therefore, the real one midoraisa can take off the shear. The second one is just a reminder. However, the third segment of the Mishnah, we're talking about outside of Eretz Yisrael. So then there's no chiyuv of challah at all. Chiyuv of challah doesn't apply anymore. So therefore, the first one, which is the real one, doesn't have a shear because there's no point. The first challah is the real challah. When you take off from the isa, they won't take off challah. The pot of the isa, right? So you don't have to take off challah. There's no chiyuv challah outside of Eretz Yisrael. Maybe only in places that were originally conquered by Yeshua, but are not a part of Eretz Yisrael nowadays. So therefore, there's no shear for that because there's no mitzvah of challah. The second one, which is just, you shouldn't forget about challah. So they said, the first one we didn't take off a shear, so we don't want to forget about challah. At least one of the challahs had to have a shear. So the second one is irrelevant, but you should have the shear, so you shouldn't forget about challah because you want to remember challah. You want to remember there's a shear also of challah, but it's not midoraisa. It's just takana d'Rabbanan over there, but there's no chiyuv challah in America. Not midoraisa, not midorabanan. That's what I want to say. A big pula. Hope you enjoyed that, and save on your dough in America. Move to America. Save on the weed in America. Inflation? Who cares about inflation? You don't have a chiyuv and challah anymore. Hope you enjoyed today's share. Have a good sukkahs. Bye.